Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Northrop, and please welcome University of Minnesota President Eric Kaler, Law School Dean Gary Jenkins, Professor Robert Stein, and U.S. Supreme Court Justice, the Honorable Sonia Sotomayor.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to members of our university community, particularly our law students, faculty, staff, and alumni. Welcome also to one of our most distinguished law school alumni, Vice President Walter Mondale. And it's always great to see Senator Amy Klobuchar. Welcome. Welcome to the many other honorable members of our state and federal judiciary in the Minnesota Bar. And I'm pleased also to see 3 members of our Board of Regents, Regents Rick Beeson, Linda Cohen, and Michael Shue. Welcome to our many campus guests. It's a pleasure to have all of you here to share the special honor of spending time with U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who is with us today. Justice Sotomayor, our mission at the university is succinct, and it's one that I believe mirrors your personal and judicial sensibilities. We were founded in the belief that all people are enriched by understanding. We are dedicated to the advancement of learning and the search for truth. We share our knowledge for a diverse community, and we seek to apply this knowledge to benefit the people of the state, the nation, and the world. At our core, then, we are fundamentally committed to a just, equitable, inclusive, and fair society. Our mission and your work for justice, particularly for and with Latina and Latino students, faculty, and lawyers, resonate with us at the university today. And among a changing legal and political climate, your fairness, temperament, and courage are exemplary. And clearly, as you can see by this beautiful and filled auditorium, the entire community wanted to be here today to see you and to listen to your thoughts. And Justice, you should be very proud that tickets for this event were in remarkable demand. Much greater demand, I might note, than for any game this season for your beloved Yankees. And now, of course, to paraphrase Babe Ruth, you had a better year than the Yankees. In closing, thank you to Dean Emeritus Stein and our Everett Fraser Professor of Law for once again helping us to host a U.S. Supreme Court Justice. Dean Stein, please, I think he deserves a round of applause. Dean Stein endowed this lecture series so that we all could have the opportunity to hear from distinguished leaders of the bench and bar. Bob, thank you for enriching the intellectual life of our university. And again, Justice Sotomayor, on behalf of the entire University of Minnesota community, thank you for visiting us, and we welcome you. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the energetic and distinguished leader of our University of Minnesota Law School. He just joined us in July, and we're thrilled to have him at the helm. Please welcome Dean Gary Jenkins.
Good afternoon, and thank you, President Kaler. Well, what a turnout. It is my enormous pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to this great conversation between our Professor Robert Stein and our honored guest, Associate Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Now, before I introduce our guests, a few housekeeping notes. If you did bring in a cell phone, please make sure that it's turned off and put away. That means no tweeting or texting until we're done. You have to bring your whole self to this moment. Second, While our conversation will start on the stage, we will expand the conversation to include the audience. And at the appropriate time, please come to the aisles. There will be microphones there. And give us your name and your U of M affiliation when you ask your question. Third, you should note that this session is being recorded. It will be rebroadcast on the web and is open to the media. So you just might want to bear that in mind when you ask your question. And finally, after we conclude the conversation, please join us in the lobby for some refreshments where autographed copies of Justice Sotomayor's terrifically thoughtful and heartwarming book, My Beloved World, are available. Now, as President Kaler mentioned, this is part of the Stein Lecture Series established by Bob and Sandy Stein. And I just want to add my thanks to both of them for their vision and generosity. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our interlocutor. Bob Stein is the Everett Fraser Professor of Law. He has been affiliated with this law school for nearly 60 years. He embodies our values of scholarly excellence, leadership, and making a difference to the state and the nation. A member of the class of 1961, he joined the faculty 52 years ago and has become a nationally recognized teacher and scholar with a focus on trust in estates and the rule of law. He served as vice president of the university, dean of the law school for 15 years, and then led the American Bar Association, serving as its executive director and chief operating officer for 12 years before returning to the law school 10 years ago. He is a commissioner to the Uniform Law Commission and was its president from 2009 to 2011. Today, he will be engaged in conversation with someone who I doubt needs much of a formal introduction. She is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful and influential voices in civic life today. And I don't say that lightly. Consider the 112 justices throughout history to have served on the U.S. Supreme Court. Very few have been as influential outside of the court as they are on the court. I was first struck by Justice Sotomayor's influence in late summer of 2009. It was very shortly after her confirmation when I watched, of all things, an HBO comedy special. Yes, deans watch TV. And it was actually a live stand-up special featuring the comedian George Lopez in a packed stadium in Texas with tens of thousands of people. And there are two things that I remember about it. One, it was really funny. And second, after some brief introductory comments, the first thing George did was offer congratulations to the newly confirmed Justice Sotomayor. And I remembered thinking in that instance that it was an odd venue to start talking about the Supreme Court, considering polls show that Americans know surprisingly little about the Supreme Court. But the audience response was thunderous. The crowd roared with approval, and also with warmth and inspiration and pride that was so palpable I could see it through the television screen. And from that moment, one could see that her voice would be a distinctive one, a voice that would matter in ways that had not been fully ventilated or even fully understood. And later, through her work, her opinions on the court, her absolutely stunning memoir, we've seen the difference her voice makes. We see her bearing witness to hard truths of everyday citizens, especially outsiders. We see her laying the groundwork for a new jurisprudence of empathy and realism. And we see her authenticity and vulnerability. This product of New York South Bronx and public housing, graduate of Princeton and Yale Law, former prosecutor and law firm partner, former federal district judge and appellate judge, is a master of doctrine, she's often referred to as a lawyer's lawyer, but also she understands the impact of doctrine on the world, on the consequences of decisions for citizens. She brings all of her life knowledge and professional experiences to bear. In law school, we're trained to be objective. We're asked to trade in old allegiances for new commitments, to overcome certain aspects in order to achieve. But what Justice Sotomayor reminds us is that there are certain commitments, what a friend of mine calls rule of life commitments, that needn't be forgotten, that needn't be overcome, that you can be different and excellent. And with her appointment to the Supreme Court, where she became just the third woman, the first woman of color, the first Hispanic justice, we see her speaking for and to and about people who have been outsiders and marginalized, but shouldn't and won't be anymore. It's through her quiet and careful work, both behind the scenes and in her opinions, that she's become the voice of the future today. I know we all look forward to hearing her voice and thoughts today. So thank you, Justice, for honoring us with your visit, and please join me once again in welcoming Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Welcome, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, to the University of Minnesota Law School. We're thrilled you're here.
This big.
This is one of our larger classrooms.
Oh.
Well,
all those people up there, I hope you can see.
Fortunately, we have a screen behind us that will help some. And to all of you, students, attorneys, friends filling this 2,700-seat Northrop Auditorium, welcome to all of you as well. We heard just before we came on, I believe that the first, second, and third balconies are all full, and so additional people, I assume, are moving to another theater to be able to see us on closed-circuit television. Now, as Dean Jenkins told you, this is the format we'll follow this afternoon. Justice Sotomayor and I will have a conversation, and following my questions, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask Justice Sotomayor questions yourself. Please remain in your seats during my conversation with Justice Sotomayor. I think you'll see the reason for that later. Justice Sotomayor, in order for the students and others in the audience to get to know you, I'd like to ask you some questions about your life and career, your remarkable career, starting in the tenements in the Bronx in New York City, to Princeton, where you graduated summa cum laude, to Yale Law School, where you were on the Law Review, and I learned this morning we're working on another journal as well, to your practice in the DA's office in New York, a private law firm, and then all three levels of the bench, the district court, the Court of Appeals, and now the Supreme Court. So there's a lot for us to talk about. You begin your beautiful book, My Beloved World, and the dean mentioned it is available, I believe, out in the lobby after this conversation, and the justice has signed copies of that book if you would like to acquire it. And you begin that book by describing being diagnosed as having type 1 diabetes when you were 8 years old. And the effect of this disease has been with you ever since that time. Can you talk about what you remember about learning of that diagnosis and how diabetes has influenced the course of your life?
I will start by answering the second question first.
Okay.
All right. Being diagnosed at an early age with a chronic disease, I think for anyone who experiences it, whether it's with diabetes or with any of the other countless silent diseases that people don't, or conditions that people don't show but live with, gives you a vulnerability that most children don't live with. And that vulnerability can set you up for two things, I think. It can make you scared about life, or it can do what it did for me, give you a sense of prizing life. I learned, because I then thought it's no longer true today, but when I was diagnosed in 1963, the prognosis for my life was one that would be very short. And I learned that through the reactions of all of the people I loved in my life, who I saw the fear in their eyes. And at age 7, you don't really understand death, but you do know from watching their eyes that this is something very serious. And I had a sense very early on that my life would be short, because that's what I was learning about this disease at the time, this condition. And I thought long and hard about what I had to do because of it. I actually went about thinking about, well, isn't this horrible? You know, why was I picked? None of my other cousins had this condition. Why was I the one who was afflicted with it? And then one day, a few months after getting out of the hospital, I was in my aunt's home playing with my other cousins, and I had a sugar low. And I went to my mom. She got hysterical and ran for the orange juice and sat me down at my aunt's porch and made me sit there and said, "You can't play." And I was seething because I drank the orange juice and I was feeling better, and I was just angry. "Mommy, why can't I play?" "Cállate, Sonia, siéntate ahí." Shut up, Sonia, sit there, okay? There's no nicer way to translate that, all right? And I seethe and I seethe and I seethe. And, you know, it wasn't doing much because my mother wasn't paying attention to me by that point. And next to me was my cousin. And my cousin, at birth, her arm had been broken and it was not noticed by the doctors. And so her arm atrophied and it didn't grow. And so she had a very tiny hand and her arm didn't move. And her parents were, like my mother was inclined to do at the time, treating her like an invalid. And I kept looking at her and and thinking within myself, you know, I'd rather have what I have and not what she has. Because if I take care of myself, I will be okay. And I will be able to do everything. But she has to make a lot more adjustments than I do. And I learned very quickly that no matter how bad you think you have it, there's somebody who has it worse. And that taught me to prize the life I had, to try to squeeze out of every minute that I had as much good as I could, to learn as much, to have as much fun, to work as hard as I could, and to just capture enough of living that if I died young, I wouldn't miss anything. I never, ever thought of taking a year off from school, and I encourage kids to do that now, okay? But I always thought, I can't waste time. I got to do everything really fast and really young. So my condition actually stimulated me to appreciate that we should live every minute of our lives as if the next won't be there. And I think that's the greatest gift I've ever received from my condition, that understanding of the value of living. And so I tell kids all the time, you don't need to have a condition or a disease to appreciate that. You should just go around and about your life as if each minute is a joy to have and something to make meaningful. And so that's the greatest gift of my diabetes. The second was my determination and discipline. You know, when you have to treat a condition, you grow to be disciplined. I learned when I needed to give myself shots and how to monitor internally my body and its state, what to do when I didn't feel well, how to get by when I didn't feel well, and push myself out of bed so I could get things done. Those are lessons that you have to teach yourself. And regrettably, most of us don't learn them until you have something happen in your life that makes you understand that you have to reach deep within yourself sometimes to get past those tough times.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. A repeated theme in your book is that you always wanted to be a judge. You write about watching the TV program Perry Mason when you were a child. In fact, you may need to explain what Perry Mason is. And that may have influenced your decision to be...
Robert, that shows everybody our age. Okay?
I guess so. Well, there's still reruns on, I think, right now. What inspired you to want to be a judge? Did you have an understanding of what judges did when you were a child? And I think significantly, how did the goal of being a judge affect the course of your life?
No. In answer to the middle question.
Okay.
I grew up in a housing project in the Bronx. There were no lawyers in the housing projects. There were no lawyers in my family. I really had no idea of what lawyering was outside of television. And the idea television gave me through Perry Mason, and for those of you who don't know who Perry Mason was, he was the first TV lawyer with a weekly series. But he was a very unusual lawyer. Every week, he got a client who was charged with a murder of some sort or another. And at the end of the show, he would prove that his client didn't do it.
He always won.
He always won. Now, I've been a judge for 25 years, and I practiced 12 before that, and I've read a lot of cases. I've never seen that happen in real life. And if I know a lawyer in this room who can say that they proved their client innocent in the courtroom, not by a jury verdict, but by getting someone to admit they committed the crime, I'll be shocked, okay? But it wasn't realistic. So my understanding of what lawyering wasn't based on any reality. But what I did know or thought about law and being a lawyer was that Perry Mason was helping someone who was in trouble. And he was helping them by helping them not only navigate the legal system, but by helping them to figure out what had really happened. And so that was my first sense of what being a lawyer was. It was helping people in their relationships with authority, because that's the only kind of case that I saw Perry Mason handling. So how did I fall in love with being a judge? At the end of one of the Perry Mason episodes, he turned around after the witness had confessed to being the killer, and he looks at the judge and says, "Your Honor, I move to dismiss the charges against my client and release him from bail." And in that moment, the judge responded, "I order the charges dismissed, and bailiff, please let the defendant go," or something similar. And I had a very bright light go off in my head. Perry did all the work. But the final word was the judge's. I wanted to be the judge. You laugh, but in fact, judges do have the final word, okay? Woe is be the lawyer who forgets that, okay? No, seriously, there's a room full of lawyers, you know? But it was that unsophisticated drive to become a lawyer and a judge over time became more educated by just the process of living my life, learning more about the law and its impact in society. I tell kids all the time, we all, every one of us, forgets how integral the law is to our daily existence. From something as simple as leave your home, go to the corner, and you stop at the red light. Why are you stopping? Now, kids will tell me because that's what mommy told me to do. But the reality is, mommy's telling you to do that because the law has told us that we must stop on red and go on green. What the law is helping us as a community establish a relationship about how we're choosing to travel from point A to point B. And in that relationship, the law is forcing all of us to give up a little tiny bit of our time in traversing from one place to another for the greater good of our society, so more people can reach their destination safely. And if you think about all of the other ways we interact, whether it's as married couples, as parents responsible for our children, as workers working with each other, as employers hiring people, all of our relationships are in many ways controlled by laws. And what those laws are attempting to do is to take conflicting interests and ensuring that we move forward as a society in a better way in relationship to one another. Now, there are times you're not going to like the compromise that the law has reached. You're going to think you're giving too much and that the other person's giving too little up. But the point is that that's the process of law, of finding that right balance of interrelationship with one another. And I began to understand that for me, I wanted to be a part of that process. I wanted to be a participant in that way of helping people. People choose a multitude of different ways, different professions that help people. But for me, the law had a majesty to it that I wanted to be a part of because it's a community builder. And that's what I wanted to do, help better and help through my work better the community that we are as people with one another.
Well, I'm happy that Perry Mason got your attention and sent you down this path. I'd like to ask another question before we get into some of your roles on the court and talk about the importance of mentors and mentors in your life and what you learned from them and how they influenced you. Jose Cabranes, founder of the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund and Yale General Counsel, and later became your colleague on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, was one of your mentors. And that great district attorney in New York City, well known throughout the country, Robert Morgenthau, your boss, I think you may have called him boss.
I still call him boss.
Were two important mentors for you. And did you have some women mentors also? And can you just talk a little bit about the importance of mentors in your life?
Well, I did, but not in those earliest stages of my life. You got to remember, when I graduated from law school, there were no women Supreme Court justices. The first came 1 year later in 1980 when Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed to the court. And it took another 13 years, 12, I think, 13 years, before Justice Ginsburg was appointed as the second female justice. There were no females on the New York State Supreme Court. I think there may have been 1 or 2 female Supreme Court justices across the country in 1979. When I got to Princeton, it was only the 3rd year of women being admitted to Princeton University. And although the law school had been admitting women, my law school, Yale, for a number of years, the numbers were still relatively tiny, about 15% of the population. There weren't a whole lot of women that I could look to, either in my personal world or even in the larger world, that could set an example of what it was or should be like for a woman to practice law. So what I had to rely on in my earlier parts of my career was looking to men of goodwill, of which there were so many, and we often forget that. As much as sexism and racism and so many of the other isms have been perpetuated by people in power, we sometimes forget that in all of those systems, there have been people of goodwill, people who care about the quality of individuals as individuals and who have sponsored and promoted their growth. And I had that through Jose Cabranes and Bob Morgenthau, who put me on the path to believing that I could be successful in my practice of law. My first woman mentor happened at my law firm about 5 years after I graduated from law school. And she was a partner at my firm, Pavia and Harcourt. It was one of the reasons I joined the firm, because it was a firm of 9 partners, and 2 of them were women. This was in an age where big law firms were of 100, 200 lawyers, and they prided themselves on having 1 woman partner. Well, the second woman partner was Cynthia Fisher, a graduate of the University of Minnesota.
Who's here today?
Who's here today. So I had 2 women role models in the earlier part of my law practice, and they taught me both how to be really tenacious in ensuring that I would stand up to all the men we worked with, but more importantly, that we were as passionate and as committed to practicing law as anyone else. And they really were instrumental in teaching me how to be a good lawyer and how to be a woman and wear it with pride. You know, a number of years back, I was at a law school in Washington, and I'm not the best dresser in the world. Cynthia and Fran were, and still are. But they taught me that I could wear earrings, like bracelets, be feminine, and still be respected and feared as a lawyer. And one of the young women, or a group of the young women, came up to me and surrounded me and said, "It is really so nice to see a female judge who looks like a woman and dresses like one." And I looked at them and they said, "Look, all of the other ones are so stately. Do we have to give up women to being a woman to be a lawyer?" And I said, "Never." And so those small things are so important in how young people perceive themselves and their ability to move forward and be successful in life. And so, yes, that's what role models have done for me.
That's wonderful. Well, let's move into your judicial career if we can. You were appointed to the U.S. District Court in the Southern District of New York. For those that aren't familiar, that's New York City, by President George H.W. Bush in 1992.
Do you mind if I start moving around now?
No, please.
All right. You'll learn if you read my book that as a child, I was a little bit active, overactive. And my mother called me ají, which is jumping pepper in Spanish, because I never sat still. I'm an adult now, and I don't like sitting still. So I'm going to walk around the audience. That will keep me more focused and more engaged with you, okay? The only problem is that this auditorium is filled with these people dressed in suits with little things in their ears. They're my marshals. And they're here to protect me from myself. Because they don't like me doing this. So if you get up unexpectedly, they get nervous. And they threaten to pull me off the floor. So if you stay seated as I walk around, you'll make them much happier, okay? So I'm going to go walk around.
Justice Sotomayor.
I'll listen to you. How's that? Robert, I can multitask, so you can ask the question.
Yes, I'm planning to. So I've never really played solo before on the stage, but Justice Sotomayor, I want to start with your district court appointment by President George H.W. Bush in 1992. When you were appointed, you were the youngest federal judge, only 37 years old, in the Southern District of New York, which is New York City, the first Hispanic federal judge in New York State, and the first Puerto Rican judge in New York City. Now, your reputation as a trial judge was that you were well prepared in advance of a case, moving a case along a tight schedule, and lawyers who appeared before you viewed you as plain-spoken, intelligent, demanding, and not having much patience for lawyers who tried to snow you. Do you think that reputation was accurate? And I was going to ask you, did you enjoy being a trial judge? But I heard you say earlier today, I was quite surprised. She said, when and if, and she emphasized if I ever resign from the Supreme Court, that rather than sitting on a court of appeals, you said you'd enjoy going back on the trial bench and trying cases, which is quite a surprising statement. So tell us about your time as a trial judge. Were the lawyers right?
Well, I don't think that everything was right except one thing. It wasn't that I didn't stand for people trying to pull things over my eyes. I think I suffer fools easily. You know where I sit, right? I was jesting. Oh. But what I don't tolerate is unprepared lawyers. You should know one thing. Mistakes in law by lawyers is a human condition, because no human being is perfect. In whatever profession that you're dealing with, mistakes are going to be made. And the law forgives an awful lot of lawyer mistakes. If I told you all of the rules that you have to go through to hold a lawyer liable for their mistakes, you would likely be shocked. No, seriously. Habeas corpus, which is what gets someone in prison to go to court and say, I'm being held unconstitutionally. Some error was committed in the judicial process that got me convicted, and I'm in jail for a non-legal reason. Well, we have a law that Congress passed that says if the court below has made a mistake, but it's a reasonable mistake, you stay in jail. So the mistake can be wrong, and it shouldn't have happened, but you stay in jail anyway. Imagine how someone who in jail knows a mistake was made And they're sitting there and thinking to themselves, but I get to stay here? So, what makes the process fair? Lawyers make the process fair. They make it fair when they give their best to representing their clients. Accepting that we're human and we can make mistakes, it's one thing. To be lazy about representing a client, or to not spend the time giving them your best, that's unacceptable to me. And there, yes, I am harsh. And so I take the criticism that there were moments when lawyers came in and were unprepared, and I challenged them to be more prepared and to think about what they were doing and why, and to come back. Because I'm not making judgments about how laws should be changed or not, about mistakes. I accept them as a given. But I do think that if you practice the profession, this is an old friend.
Yeah,
Two old friends.
I should say these are some great friends in the front row, so don't expect to be kissed when she comes by.
And their son and daughter-in-law. And their daughter. But I told you, I love being a lawyer. I love the profession of law. And I want those who practice it to be as passionate as I am, to love it as much and to try as hard. And so if we do that, then we can give clients the sense that if we make a mistake, it's just that. And that, to me, is the most important part of being a lawyer, the trying. That heart to want to help people. Thank you. How are you?
Justice Sotomayor, in 1997, President Clinton nominated you for appointment to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and you sat on that court for 10 years, hearing over 3,000 cases and writing 380 majority opinions. Now, you had a reputation for running a hot bench in the panels in which you sat, where judges asked the lawyers arguing the case a lot of questions. And truth to tell, you're a pretty active questioner on the Supreme Court as well, I think rivaling Justice Scalia at some point along the way. But could you talk about...
It's not bad to be a rival to him in something.
Talk about questioning of counsel. What's the purpose of it? Are the judges really trying to raise issues for other judges, or are you trying to steer the lawyer to make arguments that will help make his case successful?
Both things. When you're, especially on the Supreme Court, though, but on most appellate panels is the Court of Appeals, the court between the trial court, then there's a Court of Appeals, the Intermediate Appeals Court, and then the Supreme Court. The appellate courts are generally 3 judges. The Supreme Court is 9. Well, for most appellate courts, the first time the judges are talking to each other is at oral argument. That's the first time because you've been studying the case up until then, but you haven't really talked with each other about it. And so through our questioning of the lawyers, we're also sending signals to one another about what's bothering us, what issues are creating problems in our thinking or in our resolution of the case. It always shocks me, and I figured out it's because now I'm a judge and I'm so involved in the process, that I will hear the legal pundits and lawyers leave the courtroom and say, I think that judge is going to vote that way, and I think that judge is going to vote this way. And I think to myself, are they crazy? No, because I know the judges, I know what bothers them, And so I'm listening with an attuned ear about what the issues are that I know will trouble them. We all play a little bit of devil's advocate with both sides. We ask tough questions often of each side. But it is to sort of get the lawyer to give us the best answer for what's the most difficult question on their side. And so we're doing both things. We're talking to each other, and we're engaging the lawyers in an attempt to give us their very best answer to the question we think is the toughest in deciding the issues.
In May 2009, President Obama nominated you for the Supreme Court, succeeding Justice David Souter, who retired that year. And you joined the court on August 8th, 2009, as the 111th justice in the history of the United States.
My grandmother's in heaven playing that number.
Can you describe what it was like to join the court and be colleagues with these justices with whom you'd had such a high esteem for so many years? Was that a feeling of exhilaration, a feeling of humbleness, or what was going through your mind as you went on the court?
I was scared. No, seriously, I was petrified. The most fearful moment of my career as a justice was that first argument, which happened to be a very tiny little case called Citizens United. And the newspapers are filled with the press wondering what would be my first question. And I had prepared for over a month for that argument and had thought long and hard. I had 2 pages of questions. I knew I couldn't ask 2 pages of questions, but I really didn't go in with a first question in mind. And I was also very fearful about being the first question. I do that more easily now, but not then. And the first question came sort of naturally from the conversation that was going on. But there is a sense of fear in taking on a position with so much responsibility. When you read our cases as the public, you read one decision, you read the other, and you say, this one's right or that one's right. It seems perfectly clear to you, right? You wonder why we're finding it so hard to make up our minds. All right? But you have to understand something. When the Supreme Court takes a case, almost always it's because there's a circuit split. There are 13 circuit courts throughout the United States. The 50 states and territories are divided up among those circuits. And the circuit decisions affect only those courts in that circuit, in those states that circuit supervises. And each of those circuits is getting new legal issues all the time, and they are deciding them. Occasionally, they're deciding them all the same. But a lot of times, they're differing in their opinion. When you think about it, most courts are composed of judges who are trying very hard to be reasonable people. And so if reasonable people in the United States are differing in their interpretation of a law, there has to be something that's unclear. There are always arguments on both sides. There are always different ways of looking at what is, coming to the court, a gray area of law. Because if it wasn't gray, they would all agree. But it is gray. And so those reasonable people are coming to different answers. What happens when we write our opinions, most of us are pretty good lawyers. We've been taught how to write powerful and persuasive opinions. because that's our training, okay? We've now decided this is the answer, and we're going to convince you it's the answer. But you have to read our footnotes. You have to read the dissent to understand what the other side is. And you have to realize that answers among reasonable people can differ, and that no answer is as clear-cut as you believe it to be, because you're obviously seeing it from your human perspective. We're applying a very different mode of analysis to the question. We've been trained in a particular way to approach a problem and dissect it and put it back together to reach an answer. And so the way we do it may differ from the way the public does it, but you're reacting to the outcome. We're reacting to the process. We're approaching it in a way that each, as judges, believes is the appropriate way to interpret that issue of law. And so, but clearly, we're applying similar principles, but we're ordering them in different ways. And because of the guidepost in our own interpretive process, we can come to different answers.
Justice Sotomayor, a couple of years ago, I heard a panel discussion among all four of the women justices who have been appointed to the court. And the three current justices, including yourself, were asked where they were and what they felt when they heard the news that Justice Sandra Day O'Connor had been appointed to the court as the first woman to serve on the court. And I'd like to ask you a multi-part question today. First of all, that question, where were you and what did you feel when you heard that a woman justice was appointed to the court? But further, would you expand on that and describe the experience of serving on the court with two other women justices? So for the first time in history, we have three women justices. And I think it's more than a little significant. What are your feelings about being the first Hispanic justice and the first woman justice of color to serve on the court?
That's a loaded question. Let me start, where was I? I was in my office in the DA's. At the time, at the DA's office, there were 5 trial bureaus, 6, I think, trial bureaus in the DA's office. There was not one trial bureau chief who was a woman. There was no assistant chief who was a woman. There were 6 male judges who were the heads of the all-purpose parts of the court system. The 6 divisions corresponded to one of those judges. There were female judges, but all of the people in power were males. So, you're a young lawyer, a young female lawyer. There are, as I said earlier, no role models. And all of a sudden, the front page of the New York Times and the newscast of the day are featuring this woman, a mother, someone who graduated from law school and couldn't get a job, although she graduated top of her class. She beat out the guy who would become the chief judge in her court. She and Chief Justice Rehnquist had gone to law school together. She scored higher than he did. But yet, despite that, she didn't become chief, but she became an associate justice. What did it mean to me? Hope. Not about being a Supreme Court justice, but about having a career where I could aspire to become anything I wanted, just like you can. I didn't have to be a Supreme Court justice, but I wanted to become somebody who was doing really important work. And to do that, I understood that the doors had to be open. And so that's what Sandra Day O'Connor's appointment meant to me. the opening of opportunity. And so it changed the course of my life and the life of thousands and thousands of young girls and women. She is an icon to me and remains so to this day. I didn't get to serve with her, but my first day in court, after I was sworn in, I had gone to the gym. I had the gym bag over my shoulder, and I come back to my office, and sitting with my assistants is Justice John Paul Stevens. And I'm blathering away, saying Justice, and he's saying, you call me John, and I'm saying Justice. And we sit and talk, and I'm sort of shaky inside. And a few minutes later, I hear a voice, followed by this woman who comes in, and it's Sandra Day O'Connor. And the two most senior members of the court had come to my office to welcome me there. What an amazing experience.
Yep.
Sitting at my desk that morning was the bench book, and I'll explain what that is, with a note from Ruth Bader Ginsburg that said, I hope you will find this useful. What a bench book is the creation by each individual judge of their practices in chambers. You get lots of things that are repetitive in the court, motions for extension of time. And each justice has different practices around those motions. Justice Ginsburg's book told me what her practices were and why. Because the bench book is created for her law clerks who come in each year, so they know what she's looking for and how she's reacting to different things and what's important to her in judging issues. It also gives you examples of opinions and things that she has valued. For a new justice starting out, that was like the Bible for me. I've created my own since, because I've taken her base and figured out what works for me and what doesn't work for me. But having someone else's bench book was the greatest gift any colleague can give you, because it gives you a start to understanding the process of decision-making on the court you've just joined. So she, too, has become a mentor and a friend. What's it like? I don't know what it's like or how to describe being with three female justices, because I don't know what it was like when they were there alone. You know, Sandra Day O'Connor went about her business alone for 13 years. Ruth was alone for many years before I came to the bench. I know each of them has talked about how much they love their brothers, as I love the brothers I have. And is there something different in my relationship with them as opposed to my relationship with my brothers? No more different than any of the individual relationships we have. You know, Justice Alito and I both love jazz. I don't know how much he loves opera. All the others like opera. But he and I end up going to jazz performances in the city back to back. I'll go one night, they'll tell him I was there the next night, that sort of thing. Is there a difference? It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell because we are friends, and friends who are supportive of one another. But I don't think our brothers are less supportive. When Justice Ginsburg's husband was ill and dying, Justice Breyer arranged to have food delivered to her every night, because Marty Ginsburg was the cook in the family. And he knew Ruth just wouldn't eat if he was sick. And so that's an act that when I heard about it, I thought, he really cares. But it was an act of human decency that can come from males or females. It's really only about what your personal relationships are about. And I think that those are very special to me, my relationships with Justice Ginsburg and Justice Kagan.
Did you want to make a comment about the feelings that you have of being the first Hispanic justice on the court?
You know, I'm often asked about that, and I don't know how to answer. I really wish I hadn't been the first, because I really wish there had been others before me. And I tell young Hispanic kids who come up to me and say, "You took my place, I wanted to be the first." And I tell them, I'm not going to be here forever, so come, you know? I don't know that I certainly don't feel that I'm a justice just for Hispanics. I am a justice for everyone, for every citizen in this country affected by law, in a good or bad place, because that's what we're asked to adjudicate. When the law is doing something to you as a person. And I really don't think of myself as looking at it through a lens of being Hispanic or anything else. I'm trying to look at you as a person and trying to look at how the law is affecting us as a general society, not as a particular group in that society. But having said that, I think what has taken my breath away is to see the emotion that other Latinos have in seeing me in this position. For many of them, I see in them a source of pride that gives them hope. It gave me a better understanding of when they talked about our current president being elected, how so many young African-American children were seen crying because they had not seen a person who looked like them or shared their background in such a visible position of power. And I understood better what they were feeling when I saw people from my own community experiencing that. When we see the doors open for any group who has experienced being outsiders anywhere, it makes us a better place because it gives people that sense of possibility. When I welcome new citizens to this country, I often tell them, we're not perfect. No place is perfect. We have much to continue doing. We're the better because you're a part of that process of improving us. So what makes America different from other countries? It's that we have the possibility of dreaming and having those dreams come true. When we can make them real, it's something special. What are you doing here?
We're getting close to the time. We'll throw this open for questions from the audience, but I think it's important for us to reflect on the change of the court in the last year. Justice Sotomayor, can you talk both in personal terms how Justice Scalia's absence has affected the court on the bench and in relations with colleagues? And then what's it like being on an 8-person court? Has that caused a change in the culture of the court?
Well, perhaps I should relay to you the day that we walked out in the great hall of the court to await the arrival of Justice Scalia's casket. We had a day of laying in mourning at the court, and thousands of people came to pay their respects, including everyone in the higher echelons of our government. We were in the back, lined up to go out, and since I'm near the end of seniority, I was near the front of coming out. And I came out first behind Justice Kagan, and we took our spot, and I was seeing my colleagues come out. And I could actually see every one of them, including myself, catching our breath when we saw his portrait. And I could, as I stood near each of them, feel each one of us holding back our tears. Losing him was losing a member of my family. And every justice felt that way. We fought. Many of us fought continuously with him. We disagreed on so many things. But we really, deeply were friends with each other. It's well renowned that Justice Ginsburg and Justice Scalia, their families, their spouses, and they traveled the world together. There's a picture of Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg on camels together. They went to the opera often. Justice Kagan hunted with him. I've been to his home and had dinner with him and his wife. We sparred and we laughed together. But so does everybody on the court. We get angry at each other. There are moments where you want to take one of them and shake them. I've told people there are things he said on the bench where if I had a baseball bat, I might have used it. But when you work so intimately with people, you get to know the really personal, good side of them. The things that made them who they were and that made them human. Nino truly was a religious man. He truly believed in the morality of law. In a different way than I did, but I could respect his passion, just as he respected mine. I told a story earlier that one day he said, "Sonia, you're a bulldog. You get a bone in your mouth and you don't let it go." And he then stopped and he said, "That's why I like you so much. I'm the same way." And I knew he meant it, because he did mean it. It has been a deeply felt loss. What I'm describing, I think every member of the court felt in one way or another. So, has the court changed, and what do we do as 8 instead of 9? Well, we try to come to decision-making as best as we can. Where we can find a very narrow way of deciding a case, we use it. And you might ask, why don't we do that all the time? Well, because when we take cases, it's because there's a pressing legal problem that has divided the courts below. And justice across the country is being administered in an unequal way because courts in different parts of the country are deciding the exact same issue in a different manner. And so the reason we've granted cert and agreed to hear the case is to resolve that vexing legal question. And to the extent that we keep it unresolved, we continue that uncertainty. And so many will tell you that there is value to having a decision, even when it's a split decision. Because whether you agree with that split or not, at least people across the country are being treated equally. And so that has a great value that having a court of 9 gives you. It's much more difficult for us to do our job if we are not what we're intended to be, a court of 9.
Well, now it's time for you to ask some questions. As Dean Jenkins indicated, there's a microphone on each side of the auditorium right inside the door. So those of you in the balconies, if you want to ask a question, can make your way down to the main level and step inside the door. If you would line up behind the microphone on each side, I'll recognize you. And when I do recognize you, I'd like you to first give your name and indicate if you're a law student or, oh my goodness.
All right, I'm going to do this. Hello, how are you? Hello. Hi. Hello. Hi. Thank you.
This is not
Thank you for being all the way in the back. It's an honor. Thank you. All right, where are we going to start?
I'll pick up here. We're line up behind the microphones. Give your name. If you can't see, the justice is sliding down an aisle past everybody on that.
These guys are letting me through. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. They're standing up so she can get by.
Here. Thanks.
Give your name. If you're a law student, indicate whether you're a 1L, 2L, 3L, or an LLM student. If you're a lawyer, indicate you're a lawyer, some other member of the university or Minneapolis community, and we'll alternate between sides in taking the questions. So I think we're going to begin while Justice Sotomayor is still walking. So that being the case, let me take the first question on the left side of the hall here. Please give your name and identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Kate Sievert. I am a freshman here at the university in undergrad, and I was wondering when and how is empathy useful in the courtroom?
How and what?
When and how are empathy useful in the courtroom?
Empathies. All the time. If you're a judge, you are being asked to listen to the arguments of two sides. Each side feels aggrieved or entitled, depending on whether they're a claimant or a defendant, in different ways. Each side wants to be sure that you understand not only what they're saying, but the why and the feeling of it. And the only way that you can give them that sense of really hearing them is if you can empathize with their pain. And that doesn't mean one side, it means both sides. And empathy doesn't mean that you rule on your feelings, but it does mean that if you're going to rule, you should at least understand each side. That's a very different thing than believing that a judge who cares is someone who rules just for you because they feel sorry for you. I don't think that that gives anyone a sense of vindication in a meaningful way. What does give them a sense of vindication, even when they lose, is to hear a judge say, look, I ruled for this reason, but I do appreciate what the other side is experiencing. I can't tell you how many people have come to me when I've written a dissent and said, look, I lost, but at least I understand that someone understood what I was saying. And that's the only comfort you can give a loser. Because remember, in every single case in court, somebody wins, and what happens to the other side? They lose. And when they lose, they often don't think justice has been done. Would you? So the only way I think people can feel that sense of justice is if they think they have been fairly heard, even if they lose.
Let's take a question on the right side of the hall.
Now, would you do me a favor? I'm going to take a picture with people who are asking questions. For the guys up there, if you get to ask a question, come down and look for one of my marshals, all right? They're the guys with the little things in their ears. They'll get you to me so you can take a picture with me, okay?
I guess we've got some photo sessions going on in the aisle. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll recognize the questioner there. Could you state your name and ask your question?
Hi, my name is Anna Kvinga, and I'm a Master of Public Policy student here at the university. I'm currently taking Professor Stein's Rule of Law class, which is where my question is coming from. So a lot of what he talked about in class was that the U.S. law is often used in other nations to produce or create their own laws and to look to U.S. law as an example. However, I was wondering if you think that the U.S. should and can look to other nations and to international law as an example, or if you think that U.S. law is superior to other nations' law and should be only used as an example for other countries. Thank you.
The last question is easy. Laws are culturally based. To the extent that, because I've already defined for you the function of law, which is to regulate people's relationships with one another, law often becomes a symbol to people of their cultural relationships with one another. So every country you go to, none of them have taken the American legal system in total. They've taken the pieces that they can accommodate to their senses of what's right or wrong. And they have to do that because everything we do is not going to be compatible with what they think is right to do or how people should relate to one another. And so no legal culture is superior to another. Each adjusts to the needs of their own society. Yes, we are privileged because we're one of the oldest current legal systems, by the way, because there are older legal systems, Roman law, Greek law, Genghis Khan's law. I mean, there's been laws through the centuries by other cultures. But in more recent modern times, we are one of the oldest legal systems, being over 240 years old. And so many, many countries do look to what we've done because they are looking to the experience that we've had. But you get more current legal systems, for example, South Africa's. South Africa has created a constitution that Ruth Bader Ginsburg said is a better example of a modern constitution than the U.S. Constitution. Now, do I agree with her or not? I'm not going to take a position, okay? But it is a law that's somewhat different than ours. One of its fundamental rights is a right to education. We don't have a constitutional right to education. We've created it through state constitutions and through expectations, etc. But it's not part of our constitutional entitlement. And so that's a sort of different approach to the issue than a place like South Africa takes. Could we learn something? We do it without knowing it. You know, the one thing about ideas is and I'm quoting one of my colleagues from the Second Circuit, Guido Calabresi. He said, ideas don't recognize barriers. They travel freely. And so to the extent that people in Congress are looking at what other countries are doing, and some of them are studying that, look at what the conversation we had during our debates about health care, what other countries experienced, the problems they had, the solutions that worked, the things that didn't work. They were very much a part of that ongoing conversation about health care. So too are issues on big law questions like personal jurisdiction over people, where they can be hauled into court or not hauled into court. We participate in treaties all the time around very serious legal questions. And those treaties are attempting to capture the sense of development in the world around legal issues that affect everybody. So we have treaties surrounding evidence and the production of evidence across borders. We have treaties on the abduction of children. We have treaties on the use of nuclear warfare. We have environmental treaties. All of those treaties have been created by the experiences of different countries and their legal systems. And the countries get together and then try to find commonality in a way that each can tolerate. So yes, we can learn from each other. We teach each other. Could Americans be more respectful of international law and foreign law? There are situations in which we could be. Yes, you're right. Some debates among my colleagues in some cases surrounded those other colleagues' use of international law to help inform some of our decision-making. And it was criticized, and there was actually some discussion in Congress about prohibiting us from citing foreign law in our decision-making. How you can put thoughts in a box, I don't know. But people were actually discussing that. So I think it's an open question. I think the study of international law is critically important to the world today. In this smaller world that we live in, where we can reach the farthest reaches of the world through the internet, we better get to know each other better. Because if we don't figure out how to live together, we're going to continue in the kind of warfare, regional and otherwise, that we're involved in. So it really behooves us to figure out a better way to do things. Good luck to you. Thank you.
On your point about citation of foreign authority in Supreme Court opinions, I once heard a debate between Justice Scalia and Justice Breyer in which Justice Breyer said to Justice Scalia, "Are you telling me what I can read and not read when I'm deciding a case?" And Scalia said, "I don't care what you read, just don't cite it." Over here on the left side of the auditorium, please state your name.
My name is Ian Taylor Jr. I'm a 1L at the University of Minnesota Law School. And I just want to thank you, Justice Sotomayor, for coming and sharing all your wisdom with us. I had a question I wanted to ask as a law student, but also as the son of a Jamaican immigrant. I wanted to ask, what is your view on the role of immigration in terms of building our community here in the United States? You talked earlier about, in your allusion with traffic signals and how law helps build community. What's your opinion on how immigration builds community in the United States, and how does law play a role in that?
Look, this question for me is usually nonsensical because except for the Native Americans in the room, and there may be just a handful of them, nobody else is native to the United States. We are all children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. However back you want to go, every one of us can trace our background to an immigrant. Somebody came from somewhere and landed here. Now, saying that doesn't really address the hard questions. You know, when the nation was first being built, we needed open borders to permit the development of our country in terms of industry and just basic infrastructure. You know, think of the immigration of the Chinese to build our transatlantic rail lines. The level of discrimination that they were subjected to was pretty horrible. If you read perhaps the most famous dissent in U.S. history, it was Plessy versus Ferguson, in which Justice Harlan wrote that segregation was constitutionally prohibited. That was after the majority decision that said separate but equal was okay. And as everybody knows, 50-odd years later, the court went with Justice Harlan. It is a masterpiece of a dissent in terms of constitutional analysis. Yet despite that, he talked about those yellow people. I think he called them yellow creatures. He was a man of his time, and he didn't have the openness to be able to see those yellow people as people. They were creatures. We have to struggle as a nation to define what it is that's important to us in terms of being open to the world, what's helpful for our country and its development, and how to do things in a way that everyone will feel is fair. That's an ongoing political discussion, but it's a discussion about our hearts as well. We have to look within us to figure out how we balance very critical needs, both for our population as it exists and for the people who are running away from persecution elsewhere, etc. I don't know what the balance should be. I think I know what I would like it to be. All right, I have my own personal opinions. But that's not what's going to control this dialogue. What's going to control the dialogue is the country talking about it, the country debating these questions, the country being open to discussion on issues that affect it so much. And it means that people, everyone, citizens and non-citizens, have to talk with each other about it. The solution is not one solution. The solution may be many different things, but we have to continue the dialogue about it in the hopes of finding a place where we are comfortable that we remain the great nation that we've always been. But you can't do that alone. We have to do it by participating in the dialogue. I tell kids who ask me about immigration, and I get a lot of kids who come from backgrounds similar to my own, who are talking to me about the hardships of their illegal parents. And I tell them, I understand, so get out there and start knocking on doors. Start talking to your neighbors, start writing letters, start acting like citizens act when they need change. Speak up. And so if you don't like something, do something about it. Okay? That's the challenge.
Well, Take a question from the right side of the audience.
Hello, my name is Megan Guptill. I'm a 1L at St. Thomas Law, and I'm wondering what your favorite...
Where is St. Thomas?
6 blocks, maybe?
No. I'm at the University of Minnesota, guys. Give me a break.
Well, there's 3 law schools in the metro area.
Ah, great. Okay.
It's one of the competitors, but, they still invite us here. My question is, what has been your favorite United States court case to rule on, and then historically as well?
I can tell you my favorite to rule on. When I was a circuit court judge, I was a dissenter in a case called Crow versus Crow. And I was heartbroken because I really thought I was right. But so do most dissenters, okay? The comfort I took was it was an issue on the Hague Convention on the abduction of children. And it was a question that got addressed by higher courts across the world. And the vast majority of them ruled in a way that said they adopted my view of the convention and not the majority's view. And I felt pretty proud of that. I didn't win here, but I won elsewhere, okay? A year after I got to the Supreme Court, my first year, the same issue came up in another case, and the court granted certiorari. Guess what? I won. The losing judge in the court below, who's a dear friend of mine, wrote to me and said, "Sonia, this is highly unfair. You had to get promoted to overrule me." But it was strange to be a part of a court addressing an issue that I had decided on the court below. It was not a normal situation, but it does often happen. Because if you're a judge on the courts below, remember, you're dealing with those open questions that the circuits are splitting around. And so it's not unusual for you to be the judge on the court when the same issue arises.
Let me say to the last questioner...
and the last question is, what's
your favorite case?
Historically.
Roe v. Wade, Brown v. Board.
Look, I was born on June 25th, 1954. You can now calculate my age. Brown versus Board of Education was decided May 25th, 1954. And although New York wasn't segregated formally or completely at the time, it did have segregation in many de facto ways, as did the rest of the country. It changed my life. It changed your life because the issue of segregation impacted not just people of color, but women as well. And those laws began to change when the civil rights movement awakened. A decision that changes the life of so many, to me, is of historical and personal value, and one that I admire because it was the court who had decided that separate but equal could exist, and that it would truly be separate but equal. And it was the record compiled by the lawyers who brought the Brown case that showed that there was no equality in the separate facilities that existed between the races. And it was that factual reality that the court could no longer ignore and made it go back to first principles and decide that Harlan was right the first time. When the Constitution in the 13th and 14th Amendment talked about equality, it meant equality. So yes, that's the most important case for me. Good luck.
Let me tell the questioner from St. Thomas we're delighted you're here, and we're happy to have students from Mitchell Hamlin, St. Thomas, University of Minnesota. We're happy to have all of you.
Now, I think, Robert, you should tell them that at lunchtime I told the law school and the faculty that regional law schools should be working together to improve each other's offerings to the entire regional student body. So I think all of those law schools should be thinking about better ways to getting together and improving life for all of their students.
Exactly. Over here on the left side, good question.
All right, I'm going to come back around this way.
Justice, my name is Dawn Van Tassel. I'm a private practice civil litigation attorney here in Minneapolis. But I'm ceding my question time to my daughter's 4th grade class at Park Spanish Immersion Elementary in St. Louis Park, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. When their teacher, Nydia Napier, found out that I was coming here today, she saw that as an opportunity because her students have studied you and they have read your biography.
You have no idea how extraordinary that is to me. No, truly. You know, I walk into a room like this and I see so many people and I'm still shaken by it. It still moves me to the core. But the idea that kids would be studying about me, you know, it's strange. No, it's strange because I'm only me. Does that make any sense to you? I'm them. And so that they're studying me seems very unusual to me.
Well, I have a whole stack of questions here, which I promise I won't ask you. But if you do want to have that moment of disbelief, you are certainly welcome to have them. I would love to give them to you. By far the most popular question was, will you come and visit our class? I figured you were a little busy, but the second most popular question...
Well, I'll put it on somebody else. Tell one of the people I'm visiting tomorrow to give up some of their time. Unfortunately, I don't think they will.
But a lot of the questions centered around our current election, and because 4th graders don't understand the separation of powers. So my... Then again, neither do some candidates, but that's my own political commentary. But my question to you is, as a parent, how do we engage our young people in civil discourse, in learning about government, in an age where I can't even be sure that my child can watch the evening news?
You know, I thought you were going to ask me what they probably asked you, which is, what do I think? You're shaking your head yes, which I get that question a lot, which is, who do I think should be president? And I look at them and say, I only have one vote. I go into that booth like everyone else who's entitled to vote, and my vote is equal to everybody else's. Who we vote for is who you think we should vote for, not who I think we should vote for. And you shouldn't vote until you're informed about the issues and you've thought clearly and carefully about the consequences of your vote. Because that's what makes a republic. A republic is a representative form of government, but it relies on the active participant of its citizens. I say citizens because that's who votes. But others who are non-citizens can help inform you. But in the end, everyone of us will stand in that box, and this you have to explain to your child. Someday he or she will have the opportunity to make that choice. And they should be teaching themselves how to think about that choice starting now. Because as they think about it, they'll help you think about it, and they'll help other people think about it more too. We can all make a difference when we act together. And so please tell them that what I hope for them is a life filled with whatever adventure they seek, whatever dream fulfillment they want, but most importantly, one of giving to the community they're a part of, and helping all of us grow together. So tell them they can tell me who they want to vote for. Okay? Good luck to you. Do I have
Justice Sotomayor, we're getting very close to the last question, and I don't know whether you want to be on the stage when we finish.
I guess I better be, huh?
But let me recognize the questioner over here on the right side of...
All right, then let me walk over there, take the picture, but I won't answer it till I get back there, okay?
Good afternoon, Madam Justice. Thank you so much for being here. It's a real privilege. My name is Ron Goldser. I'm Yale class of 1975. I wanted to make sure you knew that we had some of our alums here.
I've met quite a few of them at the law school today.
There are many on the faculty, as well as University of Minnesota Law School class of 1978. I was going to bring my kindergarten class, but I guess they wouldn't come because the fourth graders couldn't come either, but oh well. My question, however, is related to the last question. It has to do with the current political climate. I'm greatly troubled by what appears to me to be a great disrespect for our government institutions. As I was practicing law, I got mad at many judges who ruled against me, and of course loved the judges who ruled for me. But I would get mad at the judge, and I would get mad at the individual decision, and so it goes, and that's been true for a long time. But I would never disrespect the robe. I would never disrespect the court. I would never disrespect our president. But in the current environment, there seems to me to be such great disrespect for all of our governmental institutions, no matter who sits in the office or who sits on the bench. Do you feel that disrespect in the court? Do you see it? And if so, how can we change that? How can we regain that respect for these institutions?
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I'm pausing because do I feel it on the court? One of the reasons that we're such good friends with each other on the court, despite vehemently disagreeing about so many issues, and you only have to read our opinions to know that our disagreement can get very, very animated at times, okay? But the reason that we can continue to interact and actually like each other is because we respect each other. We respect one fundamental truth. We know that each other has an equal amount of passion and love for the Constitution, for our system of government, and for doing what's right under the law. We can disagree what the answer to that is in any particular situation, but we know we're motivated by that equal passion. And that can forgive a lot. When I get a dissenter who's less than nice, I remind myself, I won. No, seriously. They have to vent. And sometimes you just have to let people vent. Sometimes we rise to the challenge and we vent back, and it's never so pretty. But often we try to control ourselves, understanding that that venting is born from that desire to take that person and what you said, shake them, and say, why can't you see it my way? But the reality is that if we've lost anything, it's that remembering that differences don't have to and don't stem necessarily from ill will. Because if you can keep that in mind, you can resolve almost any issue. Because you can find that common ground to be able to interact with each other. What do families do every day of the week? Who wants to eat what? Who wants to see this on television? Who wants to go to that movie? Who wants to do that amusement park versus that playground? And families manage to find a way to compromise it. We'll do this tonight and that tomorrow. We'll eat this this week and that next week. It sounds silly, doesn't it? But it's how we find that commonality with each other. And I think the best that we can do is live our lives setting that example. Because it's the only way we can change what exists. And we can also be demanding citizens. We can ask our politicians to do the right thing. And you can vote them in, and what else? You can vote them out. But it takes that affirmative decision on your part about what it is you want, and make sure that that's communicated in a way that shows what you expect of your country. So does the court feel it? You know, I don't like it when I read the polls that we're held in less respect. It's one of the reasons I do things like this. No, I want you to know that I'm a human being. I want you to know about the things that worry me, about my intentions. So the day you disagree with me, and you will, because I won't be a good justice unless I render a decision you don't like someday. But the day that you disagree with me, that you will disagree with me, but not hate me. Those are two very different things. And so that's why I do the kind of outreach I do. I don't have an answer. There's plenty of people in this room who do, and who are actively working at trying to change things. You should be very proud of your elected leaders in this state. They are to be admired. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. Please join me in thanking Justice Sotomayor.